The reparations panel in California has approved both an official state apology and payments. Over the weekend, the reparations task force in California voted to ratify suggestions on how the state can apologize and offer compensation to its black inhabitants who have suffered from discriminatory policies over many generations. A committee consisting of 9 members, which commenced its session almost 2 years ago, approved a comprehensive list of proposals during a meeting in Oakland. These proposals will now be considered by state lawmakers for the reparation legislation. At a recent meeting, U.S. Representative Barbara Lee of Oakland, a co-sponsor of a congressional bill to examine potential restitution avenues for African Americans, urged both state and federal governing bodies to enact reparative measures. According to Lee, compensatory measures aren't simply morally sound, but they also have the power to tackle systemic racial disparities and inequalities that have persisted for generations. The committee's initial decision ratified a comprehensive record of past injustices inflicted upon black Californians. These wrongdoings included discriminatory practices in voting, housing, education, as well as over-policing, over-incarceration, and more. Various proposals were being considered, including the establishment of a novel agency to cater to the needs of descendants of enslaved individuals, as well as deliberations on how to calculate and pay reparations to them. According to Chris Lodgson, a member of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, a group that advocates for reparations, an apology and admission of fault alone will not suffice. The task force gave its seal of approval to a draft recommendation stating that any apology from lawmakers must condemn the most heinous atrocities committed in the name of the state. Amongst the criticisms levied, former Governor Peter Hardeman Burnett is a prominent subject. Despite being the first elected governor of the state, Burnett's racist views and advocacy for laws that excluded black people from California are strongly condemned. Following California's entry into the Union in 1850, the state failed to pass any laws that would ensure freedom for all. The draft recommendation highlights that the state Supreme Court actually enforced the Federal Fugitive Slave Act, which permitted the capture and return of runaway enslaved people. This persisted for over a decade until emancipation. According to a document, California's involvement in the aforementioned atrocities only served to deepen the injustices faced by African Americans. The state's segregation policies, public and private discrimination, and uneven allocation of state and federal resources all fed into the propagation of racial prejudice throughout society. After deliberation, the task force sanctioned a public declaration accepting responsibility for past misdeeds, vowing to refrain from repeating them in the future. The statement would be read in the presence of descendants of enslaved individuals. In acknowledgement of past wrongs, California has issued apologies for its maltreatment of both Native Americans and Japanese Americans, including the internment of the latter during World War II. A segment of the report's draft was approved by the committee. This included the proposition that reparations for qualifying inhabitants should consist of monetary compensation or a comparable alternative. A congregation of over 100 residents and advocates assembled at Mills College of Northeastern University in Oakland, the birthplace of the Black Panther Party. Together, they voiced their grievances over the nation's unfulfilled pledge to provide 40 acres and a mule to enslaved people upon their emancipation. A chorus of voices proclaimed that governments must take action to rectify the injustices that have long prevented African Americans from enjoying their rights, such as freedom from wrongful prosecution, property ownership, and wealth creation without fear. Encouraging individuals to voice their grievances via protests, Elaine Brown, previous head of the Black Panther Party, emphasized the importance of expression. The recent task force meeting on Saturday was a significant step in the ongoing struggle to acknowledge and make amends for the discriminatory policies against African Americans implemented by local, state, and federal governments. Despite the importance of the proposals discussed, it is important to note that they are still a long way from being implemented. As a reparations scholar and professor at the University of San Diego School of Law, Roy L. Brooks expressed skepticism over the feasibility of implementing numerous recommendations due to their potential inflationary impact. Economists' estimates suggest that the state may be liable for reparations worth over $800 billion, which is more than 2.5 times its annual budget owed to black individuals. The task force's most recent draft report features a significantly smaller figure. Despite multiple attempts to reach out for comment on the reduction via email and phone, the group has remained unresponsive. In 2020, the task force was established by former Democratic Assembly member Shirley Weber, who currently holds the position of Secretary of State. The creation of this task force aimed to address the state's historical responsibility for the wrongs committed against African Americans. It's important to note that the task force was not intended to replace any future reparations that may be provided by the federal government. The task force had previously agreed to restrict reparations solely to the descendants of black people who were enslaved or free and resided in the country by the conclusion of the 19th century. Their efforts to research and attain reparations for African Americans have gained widespread recognition. Although similar initiatives in other locations have yielded varying outcomes, the group's work continues to receive national acclaim. As an instance, Evanston, a suburb of Chicago, has extended housing vouchers to black residents, but the program has yet to bear fruit for most of them. The Assembly of New York has passed a bill that recognizes the cruelty of slavery in the state and proposes the formation of a commission to investigate reparations. However, the Senate has yet to vote on the bill. At the federal level, a long-standing proposition to establish a commission examining reparations for African Americans has hit a snag in Congress. According to Kevin Jenkins, an Oakland City Council member, the California Task Force's efforts serve as an exemplary illustration of the power of collaboration. Jenkins expressed optimism in the ability of collective efforts to advance reparations in California and eventually throughout the nation, stating, "I am confident that we can make a significant drive." To support our channel's growth and ensure broader awareness, kindly hit the like and subscribe buttons. This will help us reach more individuals and disseminate valuable information. Thank you in advance.